For our project, we decided to follow along with the anti-ICE movement and analyze the community literacies used within the movement. This website here is an informational blog about the uprise of communities fighting against ICE kidnappings, raids, and threats across the United States of America. Pictured here are photos taken from protests and movements like the No Kings protests that happened here in Washington and other states across the country. We've got a protest against deportations in Dallas, and we've got pro-immigrant sign at a protest on Inauguration Day in Vermont. Now we start with historical awareness. The movement of abolishing ICE has been established in order to protect and defend immigrant families and communities. Historically speaking, Mexicans have been in the Americas for centuries before the U.S. existed, and in 1848, Mexico was forced to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which led Mexico to lose 55% of land to the USA. The provided link will send you to the National Archives article about the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which will tell you about the impact of this treaty. We also have pictured the land lost by Mexico during this time. And ICE threatens and harasses immigrant and people of color communities with a trend of harassing Latino, Black, Asian, and even Native American people. Because the U.S. is established on stolen land by mass genocide and the Native Americans, and the crooked treaty that took more than half of Mexico's land, it is extremely upsetting to see the Native communities of the Americas be ostracized and harassed. This marginalization goes beyond these groups and also into African American and Asian communities, where anyone who is deemed not white is subjected to harassment by a government agency. To fight against this injustice, we have seen community activism and mobilization all over the country, showing a collective awareness of colonialism, ICE presence and damage, and a movement against ICE and the marginalization of our beloved immigrant communities. As for the community literacies against ICE, we see pictured here photos from movements and protests that happened this year. And throughout this movement, people have used the rhetorical approach of pathos, understanding the emotion and fighting against hate with empathy, and ethos, fighting the notion that indigenous people, Mexicans, and Native Americans do not belong in the U.S., bringing awareness to the fact that we are on stolen land.
Hi, this is Tiffany, and in this recording, I'm going to walk you through the page titled Agency Through Collective, Community, and Biliteracy. This page focuses on how people and communities build power through collective effort, shared language, and clear access to information, especially within movements that resist ICE and support immigrant rights. To begin, the page highlights the Tarjetas Rojas, also known as the red cards. These cards were created by the Immigrant Legal Resource Center and have been distributed nationwide. Their purpose is simple but powerful: to let community members know their rights when facing interactions, intimidation, or harassment from U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. By giving people a clear bilingual tool that states their rights, the red cards help empower individuals who might otherwise feel silenced or vulnerable. And because they're bilingual, available in both English and Spanish, they're accessible to a much broader group of people. That's where biliteracy comes in. When information is available in multiple languages, more people can understand it, share it, and use it to protect themselves and their families. The page also discusses how these resources are spread, not only through formal organizations, but through everyday community members. Restaurants, small businesses, neighbors, and activists use platforms like Instagram and word of mouth to share red cards and other materials. One example mentioned on the page is communities in Columbus, Ohio. In these communities, local organizations help distribute Tarjetas Rojas. This shows that the movement isn't just happening in one city or in one region. It's growing across the country like a fire. The movement relies on collective action, people coming together, sharing knowledge, and protecting one another. The collective effort creates what this page calls agency. Agency refers to the ability to take meaningful action, even in situations where people often feel powerless. Through community networks, bilingual resources, and shared strategies, people are able to defend themselves and stand up to systems that target them. And the public involved in this movement is bigger than just those who are personally at risk. It includes allies, advocates, bilingual speakers, organizers, and anyone who believes in protecting immigrant rights. Together, this wider public forms a collective force capable of resisting injustice. So, overall, this page emphasizes three things. First, the importance of bilingual communication. Second, the power of community collaboration. And the third, the idea that agency grows when people share resources and support one another. Thanks for listening as I walked you through this page. This information really matters because it shows how language, community, and solidarity can create real protection and empowerment for real change. Before I close, there's a call of action I want to share with you guys, though. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's that silence is complicity, but action is liberation. This movement isn't just asking for permission, it's asking for courage. So here's the call to action. Show up, speak up, share resources, challenge detention, protect your neighbors, and demand a world where immigrants are not hunted, but they're honored. The fight continues, and we continue together.
Alright, moving on to actualization. Due to all the ICE raids going on around the country, we have seen protests happen in response. These ICE raids and protests are happening in major cities, especially those that have a high number of immigrant populations. We have seen them happen outside the detention centers and government buildings. Very recently, we have seen students do walkouts in North Carolina and even go and speak to those in charge. I want to talk about this moment that went viral across social media of high schooler Manny Chavez at the Hillsborough, Oregon City Council meeting. Manny was giving a speech about his experiences and fears with the ongoing ICE presence in the area and urging the city council to do more to protect the community. During this meeting, we also saw many community members that brought forward the experiences and fears of those who are afraid to speak up and those that are already detained. These are good examples of using personal stories to protest. We also have people in government who are actively representing and fighting for our immigrant communities, such as AOC. She brings unique perspectives as a young Latina woman in Congress. We have seen she always challenges those with power and defends our immigrant communities. Another form of protest is by continuing to do cultural traditions. By continuing to do these traditions, it's a form of resistance against the dominant power, like Danza Azteca that uplifts indigenous heritage to fight the erasures of native practices and people that is going on with ICE in our communities. Also, by doing cultural traditions, it shows that we aren't going anywhere.
Hi, this is Yesenia. I'm going to be taking us through the Achievement tab of our website. The presence of ICE in spaces like classrooms, work offices, churches, and doctors' offices over time has been non-permitted, but with the signing of Executive Order 1414A, or initial rescissions of harmful executive orders and actions, the line they couldn't cross before is essentially gone. Despite political pressure, many school districts and universities have released statements in favor of protecting their immigrant students. On the left side, we see a story from UChicago. The cabinet of the undergraduate student government fully rejects the presence and actions of the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Hyde Park. In recent days, federal agents detained an international student who has not been charged with any crimes. These detentions are unjust and unacceptable. They create fear, target vulnerable members of our community, and undermine safety on campus. This is an example of a part of an establishment, the student government, speaking out against ICE and in favor of protecting the rights of their student population who are non-citizens. On the right, we see Seattle University release this PDF in support of their non-citizen students. It includes student and faculty rights, as well as instructs students to document ICE activities if possible. Scrolling down, we see legal achievements, holding ICE accountable, and aiming for justice. Governor Newsom signs laws to protect schools, children, and hospital patients, and limit fear tactics used by Trump's secret police force to terrorize communities. This works against the masking of federal agents. Basically, what this does is that it limits the ability that federal agents, including ICE, have to target children in schools and people in hospitals. They talk about secret police, meaning ICE agents and other federal agents. However, there has been multiple cases of ICE agents being masked, so this law goes directly against those tactics. Scrolling down, we see New York State passed the Protect Our Courts Act, signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo, which prohibits ICE from making civil immigration arrests and of people going to, attending to, and leaving state courts without a judicial warrant. in response to a documented surge in courthouse arrests seen as abusive and intimidating. What this is talking about is how a lot of people were being arrested when they're trying to go to court, being detained even though they are upholding their rights and doing what they're supposed to be doing in the eyes of the court. On the right, we see how organizations jump to defend, protect our courts act amid Trump challenge. Scrolling down, the several arrested as protesters block federal agents in Manhattan garage, New York Times. The arrests are not an achievement, but this is an example of collective action for real change. Not only does it show the federal government that Americans will not stand for ICE raids, but it shows the immigrant community that they are valued, actively fighting the government's attempt to produce more ICE raids.
Hi, it's Malia, and I'm going to be talking about the Action tab of our website. So, since we're discussing action, I noted and provided a certain act and law that was passed by the Washington State Legislature in 2019. It's a law that restricts local law enforcement's involvement in federal immigration enforcement, and Washington is one of only about 5 other states that have laws regarding civilian safetyhood in their work or school, regardless of immigrant status. However, the protections that are described in the Keep Washington Working Act don't extend into neighborhoods or private property. Collective action and civil disrupting of peace informs governing powers that we as a people will not continue business or life as usual while our neighbors are being unlawfully kidnapped. Writing elected officials is another way to disturb the peace, and even some websites will already have an already ready script for you to copy, edit, and send right straight to your legislator. I also provided a link to an article from United We Dream, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that details how U.S. citizens can protect the immigrant community from the deportation police. We are also seeing a call to action for abolishing ICE and getting them out of neighborhoods from communities, with some even calling for an immigration system reform. There is also an example of a coalition coming together and writing Congress regarding ICE in 2008, and I thought that this was important to add because, yes, the temperature has absolutely been turned up on this issue this past year with Donald Trump's signing of the Executive Order 14148, or initial rescissions of harmful executive orders and actions. But with going back to 2008, the call for a more constructed and reconstructed immigration system that provides due process for everyone involved has been something that gets to a certain boiling point, and I think we're getting closer and closer to experiencing that. In our Actions tab, we highlight active Tri-Cities LULAC member Josefa Saldana, who mass-produced ICE whistles to hand out to the community, which demonstrates physical resistance and action against ICE presence in the Tri-Cities. We also discuss digital action, as in this new technological age, it is a great tool in order to capture the captive audience of a much larger group of people. So we talk about ICE Block, which is an app created to report ICE sightings and protect immigrant communities. This was removed from Apple's App Store under pressure from the Trump administration, but it still shows us digital action against ICE. This created more publicity due to the mass reporting of the app being forced out. Along with the app, we also highlighted a website called iceinmyarea.org, which is an ICE activity tracker, and it's created to report ICE sightings similar to ICE Block. This also shows a collective action against ICE through digital resources and technological skills. Further down, we emphasize the technological reach of social media with Instagram activism and community organizing with 6 different posters and visuals of how to know your rights. These photos were each taken from social activist programs or nonprofit organization Instagrams, using their platforms and networks and huge following to spread knowledge and different opportunities to protest and resources for legal protection. The most recognizable form of tangible action is organized protests against ICE across the U.S., which we supplied pictures of at the bottom of the Action tab.